often have you felt restricted to spiritual practices that often seem outdated and of little relevance in today's world? Are you discouraged to express your own creative talents and develop spiritual practices that are uniquely you? The Liturgical Rebels podcast is for people like you who want to reimagine and reconstruct their faith and spiritual practices. It's for those who want to reshape belief and journey closer to God's wholeness with peace, justice, and flourishing, not just for themselves, but for the earth and all its inhabitants. Welcome to Liturgical Rebels 2026 podcast. This is our third season, and once again we'll be introducing you to artists, musicians, poets, environmentalists, scientists, justice seekers, and authors from many parts of the globe about their experiences of faith. Many have deconstructed and then reconstructed their faith, often seeking a broader understanding of the great God of the universe, who is far more expansive than we can ever imagine. They have certainly enriched my understanding of what it means to be a follower of Jesus and expanded my image of God, who I believe is present in all things throughout our cosmos. In 2026, we will continue this exploration of faith and its many dimensions of expression, which can enrich and strengthen all of us. We will once again introduce you to people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives on faith and life. There will be more artists, musicians, theologians, and spiritual directors, environmentalists, and those who are passionately concerned about justice in our world. They will come from parts of the globe, but all have one thing in common. We are all spiritual seekers, desiring to encounter the great God of the universe through our interactions with each other and with creation. We all desire to be followers of Jesus and to know more of what it means to be a child of God. In today's episode, we will be in conversation with Christine Valters-Paintner, focusing on her new book, Give Me a Word. Christine is a Benedictine oblate and the online abbess at Abbey of the Arts, a virtual monastery integrating contemplative practice and creative expression. She is a poet and the author of more than 20 books on the spiritual life. Her newest book is Give Me a Word. Christine lives on the wild edges of Ireland with her husband John and dog Swane, where they lead online programs for a global community. Christine, it is a delight to be able to talk to you again on the Liturgical Rebels podcast. I loved the last interview. It's been one of the most popular that we've done. And so I'm looking forward to this one. And of course, it is the inaugural episode for 2026 as well. So it's a very special episode in many ways as far as I'm concerned. And I really enjoyed your little book, Give Me a Word. And so I'm looking forward to talking about that. Can you give me a little bit of background give our listeners a little bit of background to yourself, because you've written many books and you do all kinds of things. And, though many of us are familiar with you, I know that some aren't.
Yeah, no, happy to be back with you, Christine, and happy to be with your community here. So yes, I am the online abbess of Abbey of the Arts. We're in our 20th year of ministry, which it feels very exciting. My spiritual background is I wasn't raised in a religious household, but I kind of entered through the back door, so to speak, of discovering Catholic mysticism and but really then being drawn to a more ecumenical and kind of progressive vision of Christianity, but still very much shaped by that rich mystical tradition. and have a love of many of the saints and the mystics, especially a love of monastic tradition. So saints like Saint Benedict are very close to my heart. Some of the Celtic saints, the desert saints, Hildegard of Bingen, who was also a Benedictine saint, she's very much inspires me. And my two passions really are the monastic contemplative tradition and the creative arts, especially through the lens of what's called the expressive arts. So looking at art making as process instead of product, and helping people discover the joy of entering into creativity as an opportunity for prayer and deepening of their own their own insight into God and to themselves and to their communities. So, yeah, and I live in the west of Ireland. I've been living here since 2012 and felt called here, my husband and I, on a midlife pilgrimage. And we're very rooted here now. We love this place. We love the stories of the land and the spirituality that's brought forth both of the pre-Christian as well as the Christian tradition that's very embedded in this place. So that's a little bit about me. And then the Abbey, we offer prayer cycles and services and retreats online. And I've written, yes, about 25 books now. So I
Isn't
can't
that
help
pretty? Oh,
myself.
wow.
I just can't help myself. So that's my primary creative form would be poetry and prose, mostly
Yes.
nonfiction prose.
Well,
So.
and you write beautifully. I remember when I first discovered your books, and one of the early ones I read was about photography as a contemplative process, which I
Yeah.
loved. And it's interesting. I was chatting at our church this last week about baking as a contemplative practice.
Lovely.
Because I think, and I made the comment, I said, I think we have shortchanged the notion of
Yeah.
contemplative practices. And I thought, yeah, because these contemplative practices were initially shaped by people who tended to write
Mm-hmm.
and pray, the monks and, and such, I mean, great background. But it's kind of like we see that as the only ways that people can become contemplative. So your movement into creative contemplative practices,
Mm-hmm.
I think was very inspiring for me, and I know for many others as well. So
Mm.
you haven't written a book on baking yet or knitting. They're two. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I'm waiting for you to come out with a book on baking or knitting, or these are some of the contemplative, or gardening. No, I'm writing the book on gardening. So,
Lovely,
oh,
lovely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
No, I
no.
definitely think all of those things absolutely are opportunities for us to enter into that deepened sense of presence with the divine, working through
Yes.
all of the most ordinary things of our lives.
Yes.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful how people are discovering these things. And friend of mine, running as a spiritual practice. And he says it's one of the most contemplative things he does. And I can
Mm-hmm.
understand that.
Yeah.
Um, and, we need to encourage people, I think, to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, getting back to your book, I found Give Me a Word to be very intriguing, partly because of the fact that I have asked God for words for many, many years, and I usually do it as an epiphany practice, which is why we're doing this for Epiphany. Um, and I always find it a little scary to look back over the year and see how accurate those words have been. And
Mm.
I think I know of many people, and just reading stuff on your website, I know that this has been the kind of response that you're getting to this book as well. But I have not had a well-developed process for doing this. So tell us a little bit about the purpose of your book and the overall process that you have developed.
Yeah. Well, it came out of leading our community in this process, this practice over the last maybe 15 years. So it's developed over time. And I should start by saying that this phrase, "Give me a word," comes from the desert monastic tradition. So in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, we have these stories of the desert monks who went out to Egypt, Syria, and Palestine in the deserts to seek this radical intimacy with God. And um, and in that process, one of the phrases that keeps getting repeated in the stories is "Give me a word." So a seeker will come to seek out one of these holy men and women, and to seek their wisdom. And so the word isn't necessarily a single word. It's might be a phrase, it might be more of an image, but this this longing or desire that brings the seeker out into connection with the holy person, right, who has some wisdom to offer because of the way they've been living in this intimate presence with the divine. And so I, um, started inviting the community to do this as sort of an alternative to a New Year's practice. Now, it doesn't need to be done at New Year's, it can be done any time of year. But it seemed like a good alternative to me because
Yes.
New Year's resolutions, I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but they have a very different feeling to me,
Yes.
right? They feel more about fixing ourselves or, locating the problem. Whereas this is more about seeking wisdom to help guide us in the next season of our lives, to challenge us, to nurture us. So the process in the book is basically divided into 30 days. So someone could do a 30-day retreat with a practice each day. The first 10 days are really about listening for the word. So I talk a lot about just the different ways that we are invited to get out of our own way, to let go of our own expectations, and to wait to receive a word. So it's not so much about finding the best word to meet whatever problem you're facing. It's really about listening in a variety of ways, whether that's through presence in nature or with a soul friend or through dreams, different ways that we can listen to the world around us, whether we're baking or knitting or, gardening.
Yes.
All of those are definitely portals to this process of just holy receptivity. So in the first 10 days, I suggest practices to help with that slowing down and opening the heart and attuning to the world around us and receiving. Then the middle 10 days is really about um, receiving the word, which is I kind of describe as a process. So we might think, oh, this word is landed and it's definitely my word, but we might need a little bit of time to test it out just to see if that is the word that's calling to us for this season ahead. And so there's practices that help us with that. And then the last part is really about carrying the word into the year,
Mm.
because once we have the word, what do we what do we do with it? How do we remember
Yes.
it? How does it keep working in us? And so the last third of the book offers various practices. And a lot of the practices in the book are around expressive arts or embodiment or different kinds, as well as some contemplative meditative practices that are just different ways to open up our senses and our hearts to, what might be offered to us as gift, really.
Lovely. Yeah, because I think, this is, I know, the area that I've kind of been the worst at, but the years I've done the best is when, in spite of the fact that I'm not an artist, I have done some artistic design around my word or something
Mhm.
like that that keeps it in front of me all through the year. And I think that's very important and probably the place where most people fall down. So I really enjoyed that section of the book. But
Yeah.
in the early stage, I loved the imagery of picturing a doorway and opening it. I think many of us love doors, and particularly in Europe, the beautiful doorways you see all over Europe and in Ireland, and doorways on ancient buildings where just the doorway uh, is left. But why do you think doorways matter so much? Um, and particularly in this process of asking God for a word as we look ahead.
Yeah, I have a love of doorways and thresholds.
Mhm.
And, we often find ourselves in a threshold space, which is uh, a space where the old has fallen away and the new has not yet come to birth.
Mhm.
And so, doorways, physical doorways often are beautiful images and symbols that can help us to learn how to be in these places of unknowing, right? To be in that symbolic space of opening the door onto the new possibility and to help us rest in that in between space. And so, this process of Give Me a Word, I think what I really want to encourage people is that you don't you don't know what the word's going to be. You don't, you know, you might have inklings of what your longings and your desires are, sure, but often for me, the words that have had the most power have been the ones that have been surprising
Mhm.
or challenging, the ones I
Yes.
wouldn't necessarily have chosen for myself. And so, yeah, for me, and the Celtic imagination thresholds are the places too where the divide between heaven and earth is thinner.
Mhm.
So we have threshold
Lovely. Yeah.
moments throughout the year, like the turning of the Celtic seasons, right? But there's also the physical spaces, the place we might go to on pilgrimage to visit, right? Or a sacred site near where we live. All of those speak to this, I think, human longing to always be in that space of perpetual transformation and always opening our hearts to the new, to how the divine or the sacred, or however we name that reality in our lives, how that's always calling us to ever new thresholds in our lives, to always be seeking that sense of holy wonder and expansion, really.
Mhm. Well, and it's interesting, as you were saying that, I was reminded of a scientific article I read several years ago that talked about, the phenomenon that we're all very aware of how when we walk through a doorway, we often forget what we were going for. And it's like we do leave the old behind, and sometimes we don't want to leave the old behind, as it were. But there is
Mhm.
that sense that somehow a doorway is a physical. I mean, and the scientific research shows that this is true, that there is a kind of a process of walking across a threshold that makes us want to leave something behind. I think
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Now, one of the phrases that really caught me, beautiful phrase, listen carefully with the ear of your heart. Wow. Um, But what does it really mean? What is the ear of your heart as far as you were concerned?
Yes, well, that phrase actually comes from the first line of the Rule of Benedict. And
Ah,
so,
okay.
yes, so he is, inviting his community members, those who are seeking this life of deepened contemplation, to listen with the ear of the heart. So the heart is really that organ of divine perception. So there's a
Mhm,
physical heart that we have that we rely on for life, but there's also a spiritual or metaphorical heart that we each have. And so I often teach about, the mind is really important, but the mind is the place often that it tends to be more linear, tends to be more the planning mind, the mind that sets goals, the mind that's trying to get somewhere, the mind that, is on a certain trajectory. Whereas the heart is more, I think of it more as like the inner sanctuary. The desert monks would have called it the cave of the heart. It's that
mhm,
open spaciousness within us that's able to simply rest, to be, to attune to the world. And so to listen with the ear of your heart means to listen from a place of receptivity, of letting go of expectations, of releasing our need to plan or figure things out, because that might be an inclination in some of us, especially if we're sort of in
Yes.
that in that mode of planning mode, or we like to figure things out, of course. That the word that we're seeking or wanting to receive, um, that we will hear it with the heart. We're not gonna hear it with the mind, with the
Mhm,
part of ourselves that wants a particular word to help us solve all of our problems, but instead to receive a heart that will beckon us into a deeper level of transformation in our
mm.
lives and opening that door to mystery in us. Yeah.
It really is beautiful. I love the way that you weave the spiritual practices that you've already mentioned into the process of finding a word.
Mhm.
Traditional kind of practices like Lectio Divina, prayer of examen, but also some of the ones that many of us are discovering more are these interactive processes with nature, such as going out and doing nature mandalas, which is just really fun. And it's a very meditative kind of process, drawing on the wisdom of dreams. And that's one that, many people would love to get into, though, to be honest, I'm not a person that remembers dreams. My husband does quite frequently. But give us some insight into the different practices and how you feel they can help shape our words.
Yeah,
Now, I
so
don't want to spoil the book for people,
yeah.
but
Well, I'll mention, the ones that you've talked about just to give a little more inkling into what they're about in terms of this practice. So, so like our dream consciousness, again, I think is more connected again to that heart awareness because the dream knowing is, again, it's not that linear way of knowing. It offers us symbols that might not even make sense to us at first. And I often think, and even if we don't remember our dreams, we might spend time in the morning when we first wake up, if we're able to, if we don't have to get right up with the alarm, to rest even for a minute in that liminal space, again, that threshold space between sleeping and waking, and seeing if we can feel for, like a feeling or an image or something that is is staying with us. Because our dreams, I believe, and I draw on the work of Carl Jung a lot, that dreams really are the voice of our unconscious, giving voice to a deeper longing that hasn't yet come to light. And so I think that that dream wisdom can give us a lot of insight into what the word might be when it arrives. And dreams, when we work with dreams, we work with them in layers, right? So the dream, when we work with it, it doesn't immediately reveal all of its wisdom to us. It takes time to sit with it, to sift through it. And I think our word is like that as well. We might think, oh, I'll spend a weekend meditating on my word and then I'll have it all figured out. Right.
Yes.
But the idea is that, the word can keep nourishing us over time. There's a great one of the stories in the Desert Mothers and Fathers about how a monk came to, this desert father and asked for a word and he received his word and then he comes back 20 years later and ask for another word. So I think it just gives an insight into like they weren't talking about quick fixes, right? This is
Yes.
something to be worked with over time. So dreams can do that. And then the nature mandalas is just a wonderful process of it. Sort of, it's almost like having a waking dream where you're in conversation with the natural world and you're letting symbols, yeah, objects from nature come to you as pieces of a design that you put together. And then that gets to be, yeah, I'd say like a visual representation of almost a dreaming kind of state, because it's really something that you do to open your heart, open up your senses, your awareness to how the divine might be speaking to you in a whole different language. I like to think of the divine as like a multilingual, being who speaks to us through our bodies, through the natural world, through the dreaming world, through our relationships, through animals, all of these different ways. And so the more we can open up our senses to these different languages, the more we will hear that sacred voice on multiple levels in our lives.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Excuse me. In the third section, in the second section of the book, you talk about receiving the word and allowing it to ripen. And I know this is really what we've been talking about here, but I love that concept because I think that so often, as you said, people just go into this, we live in a world where everything's got to be instant and then we move on to the next thing. And I think that a lot of the discipline of what you're talking about is of being able to slow down and
Mhm.
sit without moving on to the next thing. So what do you mean by allowing the word to ripen?
Yeah. Well, I love the imagery of ripening because for me, seasonal wisdom, the wisdom of the seasons is a very big guide in my own life
Mhm.
and process. And
Yes.
so trusting, the time it takes to move from germination to blossoming. And I'm not a gardener, but from what
Oh, it's wonderful to
yeah,
actually do it
yes,
and
yes,
contemplate it too, I can tell you.
exactly. And, to be able to witness that unfolding of that process and how you would never pluck a flower that was just a bud and try and force open
Mhm.
the
Yes.
leaves and the petals to make it bloom. Like you just wouldn't ever do that. And so it's the same, I think, with our souls and with the words that come to us. You might think of them as these little buds, that need time just to slowly expand, similar to what I was talking about in terms of dream imagery, that it
Mhm.
takes time for it to unfold. And so in that section of the book, I really have people explore things like how do we learn to trust what we love? Like sometimes we don't trust ourselves completely. We don't trust our desires. We don't trust,
Mhm.
that what we love is really, maybe what's of benefit to us. And I invite people to do things like consulting the elders, the mystics, the desert elders, the saints and mystics, but also the angels, saints, and ancestors, who are another part of like the kind of spiritual community that we have to draw from. And angels are um, honored and revered across a variety of traditions.
Mhm.
Islam, Judaism, Christianity all speak about these divine beings that are bridges between heaven and earth. We have the witness of saints, who I think of as the wise and well
Mhm.
ancestors that we can call upon. And then, of course, our own ancestors, whether they're blood ancestors or whether they're spiritual ancestors or create like part of our creative lineage, that we can call on these wise guides to help us, yeah, test the word, see if this is really what's for us to move into this next season with, to go into our bodies and listen for the wisdom of our bodies to speak to whether this word is really like the fullness of um yeah, of what we're called to move into. Is it the word for us to ripen? Is there enough of a ripening season ahead, right, to
Mm.
carry our energy and our attention into the future as we move with it? So,
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of that. I forget, um that I'm getting old and that there may not always be that season ahead for some of the things I'd love to see ripen. And I
mhm,
think in those situations, we often need to find somebody else that
mm,
can ripen them, you know,
mhm,
because, which in a way, I mean, one of the things you learn in gardening is sometimes that you have a rootstock and then
mhm,
you graft on something else,
yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it makes the grafted tree stronger because of that rootstock. And I think, in a way, as we get
mhm,
older, this is
mhm,
something we need to think about.
yeah.
What's meant to be grafted on to the rootstock
Yeah,
we've
that's a
laid?
beautiful metaphor, yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
um, we, ministry we've had, that's kind of what's happened. We've handed it over to somebody else, and they're
Mhm,
growing it. It's like they
yeah,
were grafted in. Um, and it's beautiful to see that
yeah,
process, I think so. Anyway, in the third section, you talk about carrying the word with you.
mhm,
And as I've already said, that is definitely the part that I'm the worst at. Um, but yeah, um, there are these processes that can help us keep the word with us through the
yeah.
year. And is there something else that you would like to add to that in terms of what kinds of things you have found help us move in that direction?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the practices that I put in that section have to do, again, with creative work,
Mhm.
whether that's creating a prayer that's rooted in the word that we receive, whether that's making a collage or some sort of visual representation, whether that's writing a poem. I have a suggestion for creating a playlist of songs. I think those kinds of practices help us to embody the word in a different
Hmm.
way. Again,
Yes.
going back to those multiple languages, it helps us to integrate in ways that our mind doesn't, just give us the fullness and richness and depth that integrating it through the body, through the visual senses, through all of the creative arts can help us, bring it into a more deeply rooted place in ourselves. And I think like we're 6 months down the road after receiving your word, you're more likely to be remembering it and to be contemplating it
Hmm.
if you have a prayer that's come out of your own heart that you have maybe posted somewhere and you pray every morning, or you've created an image that you have up on your altar that helps express something of what this word is meaning for you. And maybe there's a whole series of collages
Hmm.
um, as you continue to work with the word and it continues to unfold for you. So for me, a lot of expressive arts and
Hmm.
embodied ways are really helpful, I think, to help us carry that word through the year. Yeah.
Mhm. And I would agree, definitely, writing of prayers and poems and, all kinds of things that I've certainly found help as well. And, I was thinking for the men, we've talked about more womanly pursuits in a way, though a lot more men are knitting these days, but woodwork, well, and of
Yes.
course, the gardening and things like this. I
Mhm.
have a friend who, designed his garden very much around, how would God design a garden? And it was very much this kind of process of words for different
Mhm.
parts of the garden. It was just beautiful. It really was
I love
to
that.
see that, and he, he's taught me a lot about, other ways to enter into these kinds of things. So, and that a
Beautiful.
lot of men do. Now, a question that comes very much out of my own personal experience
Mhm.
because my mother was Scottish, had a very strong belief in the second sight.
Mhm.
Uh, and the fact that expression of the second sight was seen in her family and in many Scottish and I suspect other Celtic families as well. And I always felt that the words that I got came out of that Scottish background,
Mhm.
that kind of Celtic kind of belief, in the second sight and something mystical that exists within us.
Mm.
Um, and so part of what I do wonder about is, are there certain kinds of personalities or ethnic streams or something? This is a hard question, I know, but I'd love your opinion on that are drawn to this kind of a practice of a word. Um,
Yeah, I think it's probably, would most draw someone who is already drawn toward the contemplative life, but I don't wanna say that only people who consider themselves contemplatives could do this
mhm.
practice, because I think if there's any spark of longing or desire, because maybe that's the first step across the
Yes.
threshold, the doorway into the contemplative life for you might be this practice. Because really it's for people who are willing to keep showing up, to keep listening, to keep trying to get out of their own way, to keep, noticing when their own expectations are cropping up, and just gently bringing themselves back to this open-hearted receptivity. But it's not something you have to get perfect, right? So
Uh-huh.
there's like a humility of willing to get things wrong, quote unquote. Not that there really is anything to get wrong, but you might do things differently and it might not be as effective for you or you might be in a place where you feel really distressed and you are trying to pull that bud of a flower open too
Mhm.
soon. And I think that when we stay with that process, I think there's always like the wisdom deepens the more we repeat that, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
we learn over time how that slow unfolding works for us and manifests for us. So, it's all process. And I think anyone who desires it um, is welcome across that threshold, and welcome to begin to play with what does it mean to live life from a different orientation, where
Yes.
it's not so much about always trying to figure things out, always trying to get things done, but actually resting in that divine presence and receiving the gifts that come. Yeah.
Yes. No, I would agree. And I just wanted to throw that in because I know some people will say, well, that's not for me. But I think it can be for anybody. And as you said, if
Mhm.
you're really wanting to listen to God, this is the kind of process, no matter what kind of person you are,
Yeah.
that can be helpful. And I'm actually hoping that in a couple of weeks, towards the end of January, that my church is going to take on some of this. And, and I've seen different ways that people have done it. One of my um, Episcopal priest friends hands out Star words
Oh, lovely.
at
Yes.
Epiphany. Yes, and that's
Mhm.
another way of doing it that I think is, the only thing I didn't like with that is that you didn't in a way get to choose your word. You got
Mhm.
a word and then kind of were meant to reflect on what it was that God was saying to you through that word.
Mhm.
But there are different ways of doing this process too, I think that might appeal to other people. So,
Yes,
um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So, but it's a very helpful kind of a process. Um, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
Mhm. I think the only other thing that I want to share on this is that, that the word that comes to us, whether it's a word or a phrase or an image, it's a gift for our ongoing transformation, but
Mhm,
it's also a gift for our wider community, because whatever is inspired in our hearts is always meant to be brought back as gift to others, to in service to, the growing liberation of our world, really. I mean, not to make it sound too grand, but for some of us that will be in small ways, and some of us that will be in larger ways. But I think to always remember that there is a dynamic that comes in the contemplative life, no matter what practice we're doing, that draws us inward into that receptive place, and then draws us back out again to offer, the gifts. It's like going on pilgrimage and coming back home
mhm,
with the treasures that we're carrying, right? That
mhm.
ultimately there's always something that we bring back, whether it's even
Yes,
just us having more clarity or more sense of peace, about
yes.
who we are and what we're called to do in the world. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think Rowan Williams made the comment in one of his books that I read that we are always either growing
Mhm.
or we are stagnating. And I
Mm.
think these processes we're talking about are definitely ones that help us to grow. And if we're still in the same position now as we were 5 years ago, um, then there's probably something wrong with
Yeah.
where we're at. But yeah, well, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Christine, for sharing this. And I hope that some of our listeners do take on this process
Mhm.
and get hold of your book. And as I said, we will have all the information about that in the show notes and they will be able to access it. I know through your website, which is also a wonderful place to explore. Um, and tell them the name of your holy order. I love this.
Oh, the holy disorder of dancing monks. Yes.
Yes, it is the most creative and expressive order that I know of, and it's just wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Lovely to be with you.
In today's enlightening conversation, Christine Valters-Paintner shared her insights on the contemplative practices that foster spiritual growth and creativity. We discussed her book, Give Me a Word, which encourages individuals to seek a guiding word for the year, drawing from the rich traditions of monasticism and the expressive arts. Christine emphasized the importance of listening with the heart, the significance of doorways as symbols of transition, and the transformative power of creative practices. The discussion also touched on the communal aspect of personal growth and how the insights gained can be shared for the benefit of others. In the next episode of Liturgical Rebels, our 50th episode since we began just over 2 years ago, I will be in conversation with Susie Lee, author of Raising Kids Who Care, Practical Conversations for Exploring Stuff That Matters. Susie has been part of a co-housing experiment in Wollongong, Australia. She has a master's degree in peace and conflict studies. Her eclectic career twirls around the twin themes of social justice and children, including state and national consultancy roles with children and families, international aid, and the development and advocacy. I am Christine Sine, an avid gardener, liturgist, environmentalist, seeker after justice, and speaker on spiritual practices. I am the author of Celtic Advent, Following an Unfamiliar Path, and The Gift of Wonder. I also write regularly on Substack at Walking in Wonder with Christine Sine. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the podcast. Please also share it with your friends or join me on Substack, Instagram, or Facebook.